Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Israel to build 240 settlement units in East Jerusalem. Ahmadinejad taunts Israel from Lebanon. And the UN to boost Sudan border security. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved the construction of nearly 240 new settlement units in the two settlements of Ramat Eshkol and Pisgat Ze'ev in East Jerusalem.
The Israeli Minister of Housing said that after negotiations with the Palestinians collapsed, Netanyahu gave orders to continue the settlement campaign. This was done in response to political pressure from multiple sources to begin construction in Jerusalem in order to prove that the city is excluded from the negotiations.
The Palestinian Authority criticized the new settlement plan, considering it a means to eliminate any chance of resuming the negotiations.
المسمار الأخير في نعش المفاوضات فمناقصة وزارة الإسكان الإسرائيلية لبناء وحدات استيطانية في القدس الشرقية أعطيت الضوء.
This is the last nail on the coffin of the dead negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved the Ministry of Housing's bid to build new settlement units in East Jerusalem. 238 settlement units will be built in the two settlements of Ramat Eshkol and Pisgat Ze'ev. According to an Israeli media report, the announcement of the construction plan was postponed in order to avoid a crisis in Israel's relationship with Washington. The report said that Netanyahu requested information on any bidding that could be politically sensitive. If this act by Netanyahu was caused by the political intervention of the Israeli extreme right wing, it proves that he does not yield to pressure demanding a settlement freeze. At the same time, it may well undermine any chance to restart negotiations with the Palestinians, who are demanding the U.S. administration hold the Israeli government responsible for the negotiations and the peace process.
بتحميل الحكومة الإسرائيلية مسؤولية انهيار المفاوضات وعملية السلام.
Israeli government continues in its game of deceit.
The Israeli government continues its game of deceit. Indeed, it talks about peace, but in reality it continues to tighten its grip on the West Bank and the occupied territories. It continues to undermine any possibility for a real and serious peace process.
وفي موقف مشابه رأت حركة السلام الآن الإسرائيلية أن الهدف الحقيقي من
The Israeli Peace Now movement shares that opinion. It believes that the real goal behind this act is to create an obstacle for the resumption of negotiations. Israeli media is saying that Netanyahu informed the Americans of his intention to propose new plans. In March, Israel approved the construction of 1,600 settlement units in East Jerusalem during the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's visit to Israel. This act angered Washington at the same time. So what will it do now?
أغضبت واشنطن حينذاك، فماذا ستفعل الآن؟
In a related development, Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Abul-Gheit said that Arab countries may request UN recognition of the Palestinian state if Israel continues to build settlements in the West Bank.
يجب أن نبحث عن آفاق جديدة في العملية السلمية تؤدي إلى تحريك.
We should find new channels in the peace process which could lead the efforts to achieve a real peace settlement. Perhaps we will resort to the international community and request that it recognizes the Palestinian state and grant it its legal United Nations seat.
As the olive harvest begins, Israeli settlers stepped up their attacks on Palestinian farmers and their land.
The farmers whose lands are located near the settlements are enduring several problems, most notably the ban on accessing their land and settler attacks, in addition to the many cases of the uprooting and torching of their trees.
Shireen Abu Akleh has returned to the village of Kufr Kadum, located west of Nablus, and prepared the following report.
Ata Yusuf travels several kilometers from his Kfar Kadum village west of Nablus to reach his land. After 1977, the settlers built the Kadumin settlement near Ata's land, making his daily trips to his land a major challenge. Ata, along with 30 family members, mainly depends on his farm's production of olives and oil. However, the problems caused by the settlers are endless.
It's impossible for this tree to sustain damage on its own, because it was healthy when I checked up on it a month ago. Then, its olives looked very good, praise the Lord. Now as I returned to harvest the olives, I was shocked to see that this tree has been poisoned. It was most likely sprayed with a chemical substance.
They are trying to seize control of our land by every means possible. They wait for us on the road and prevent us from accessing our land. They wear masks. They want to steal the land at any cost.
A few kilometers away, Omar Shitawi is facing a different problem. Several months ago, he came to his land to find his trees uprooted. In a separate incident, dozens of his trees were also burned down. He was denied access to his land for 2 consecutive years. Today, he needs a permit from the Israeli army to authorize him to access his land twice a year.
Currently, I'm not allowed to enter my land unless the village council authorizes it. This allows me to access my land once or twice a year.
فشجرة الزيتون التي ينظر إليها العالم كرمز للسلام.
The olive tree, which the world perceives as the symbol of peace, has become part of the Palestinian struggle over their land. Any Arab land located near the settlement is being declared by Israel as a closed military zone. According to EU estimates, nearly 100,000 Palestinian families depend on olive products as a main source of their livelihood. In cooperation with Oxfam International, the EU has launched a project to help farmers produce better quality olive oil, as well as sell their products on European markets.
من خلال إنتاج زيت أجود وفتح الأسواق الأوروبية أمامهم.
The project that we are supporting requires access to the land all year long because you must look after the trees. You need to make sure that the irrigation system is working properly and that you have medicine to combat plant diseases.
Nothing is better than a tree to establish connection between a person and their land. By uprooting this tree, the settlers believe it will be easier to uproot the Palestinians from their land. However, this is not an option for the Palestinians, who believe that the olive tree is not only a source of livelihood, but also a source of life.
We open with a government decision to resume construction in Jerusalem following months of inactivity over the Green Line. The Ministry of Housing has issued tenders for the building of 238 new housing units in northeast Jerusalem. The list includes 150 residential buildings in Ramot and another 80 in Pisgat Ze'ev. This is the first time tenders have been issued for sites over the 1967 border since the March visit to Israel by U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. According to diplomatic sources in Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved the tenders after Israeli officials discussed them with the U.S. administration and reduced the number of slated units following Washington's displeasure over the renewed construction. Labour Party Minister Isaac Herzog said that he has no problem with the new construction, saying that Ramot and Pisgat Ze'ev are Jewish neighborhoods in the heart of the Israeli consensus and should have no impact on the peace process. Palestinians, however, reacted furiously to the announcement, saying that Israel is killing any chance of restarting bilateral peace talks. Chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat called upon the U.S. administration to hold the Israeli government responsible for the collapse of the negotiations. There has been swift response to the provocative speech delivered by Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in southern Lebanon last night from both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the U.S. State Department. More in this report from IBA's Eli Wogelenter.
We heard the insults and curses from the Lebanese border today, said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a visit to Independence Hall in Tel Aviv, the place where David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence in 1948. The best answer to these curses was given here 62 years ago in the Declaration of the State, and all that we did, built, created, and achieved in the 62 years since then. Look what a people, what a state, what an army the people of Israel and Zionism has today. We will continue to build, to create our country, and we will know very well how to defend it. Netanyahu was responding to Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's speech during a visit to the town of Bint Jabal near the Israeli border, in which the Iranian leader taunted Israel. Bring defeat to the Zionists, Ahmadinejad declared, calling for a Palestine to be forcefully freed and for the Zionists to go back where they came from. He called Bint Jabal the capital of freedom, the capital of resistance and victory, and that the Lebanese resistance is more powerful than the swords of Zionists. In his tirade, Ahmadinejad said the Zionists are responsible for the economic crisis and air pollution in the world. Later in the day, Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah presented Ahmadinejad with a gift to cap off his two-day trip to Lebanon, an Israeli assault rifle captured during the 2006 Second Lebanon War. The rifle was presented in a felt-lined box with a row of bullets during their meeting at the Iranian embassy in Beirut.
في لبنان التقى الرئيس الإيراني محمود أحمدينجاد مع الأمين العام لحزب الله.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad met with Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. This was Ahmadinejad's last stop in his visit to Lebanon, and it has generated a great deal of controversy. The Iranian president toured the south yesterday and visited the town of Bint Jabal, located just a few kilometers away from Israel. During his visit there, he commended Hezbollah's resistance, saying that Israel is going to perish. Ahmadinejad's tour was criticized by Israel and the United States.
استقبال مدينة بنت جبيل للرئيس الإيراني محمود أحمدينجاد شكل حدثاً سياسياً.
The city of Bint Jabal's grand welcoming of Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad turned into political and security concern due to its location close to the border with Israel. Ahmadinejad is the first Iranian president to visit southern Lebanon's border region. The large crowd organized by Hezbollah and the Amal movement carried pictures and flags to remind people of the numerous conflicts that occurred between Hezbollah and the Israeli army. Ahmadinejad responded to the rally by promising that Israel will disappear.
Let us tell the whole world that the Zionists will disappear. The just people of Bint Jabal will make the tyrannical Israeli enemy taste the bitterness of defeat.
رمزية الزيارة تكمن في أن مدينة بنت جبيل تسمى من جانب
Hezbollah refers to the town of Bint Jabal as the capital of victory over Israel, which makes this a symbolic visit, in addition to the fact that Bint Jabal hosted the celebration following Israel's withdrawal from southern Lebanon. Under these circumstances, the Iranian president reiterated his support for the Lebanese army and the unity of the Lebanese people of all sects and religions. A number of representatives from the different sects attended the rally, including Bishop Elias Furi, the Greek Orthodox Archbishop of Sidon, Tyre and Marjayoun.
Israel wants the situation to be more tense. We honestly and clearly want peace. I say that we should implement UN resolutions, so let them be implemented.
Security for the Iranian president was heightened, and both the Lebanese army and air force were assigned to the mission. Meanwhile, Israel announced its concerns over Ahmadinejad's tour. Much has been said and will be said about Ahmadinejad's position on Israel, starting with his visit to southern Lebanon. But some here in the south are saying it has opened a new chapter of the continuing conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. Mohammed Noon, BBC, Bint Jabal City, southern Lebanon.
وتعليقا على هذه الزيارة قال رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بنيامين نتنياهو.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu commented on Iranian President Ahmadinejad's speech at a hall in Tel Aviv that was used by David Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli Prime Minister to announce the establishment of the state.
في إعلان قيام الدولة.
لقد استمعنا اليوم إلى لغة الشتائم والازدراء عبر الحدود اللبنانية وأفضل رد على من يسبنا.
We heard today the cursing and contemptuous language from the Lebanon border. The best answer to these curses was given here 62 years ago in the Declaration of the State, and all that we did, built, created, and achieved in the 62 years since then.
مسافة نحو 80 يوما من الاستفتاء قرار دولي انتهى إليه المجتمعون في
With 60 days remaining for southern Sudan's referendum, the UN Security Council approved a resolution to deploy additional troops in a bid to deter violence during the January 9th vote. The international forces will be deployed along the north-south border in the next few weeks. Their number has yet to be determined. The additional troops will join the 10,200 international security and police forces already deployed in Sudan to monitor the implementation of the 2005 peace agreement. According to the peace accord, Sudan is to hold two referendums, one for the independence of the south and another to determine whether the Abyei region will be part of the north or the south.
في غضون ذلك برز خلاف قديم جديد بين شمال السودان وجنوبه على استفتاء.
Meanwhile, an old feud between the north and the south has resurfaced ahead of the referendum on the oil-rich region of Abyei. Didiri Mohammed Ahmed, a senior member of Sudan's ruling National Congress Party, said that it's not possible to hold a referendum on the future of the country's oil-rich Abyei region on time due to a disagreement over the definition of eligible voter. Ahmed asked that the referendum be delayed or the dispute be settled by other means. In response, Abyei's governor, Deng Orob, said that delaying the referendum is unacceptable, saying it must be held on time. Orob further said that the local authorities may help organize the Abyei referendum under UN monitoring.
ودعوة الأسرة الدولية لمراقبته.
The oil-rich region of Abyei is located west of the Sudanese state of Kordofan. The region is home to a mixture of African tribes, such as the Dinka, and Arab tribes, such as the Misariya and Rezekat. The tribes have been living in the region since the mid-18th century. The region, which currently falls under the administration of the North, has gradually turned into a disputed area between the Sudanese government and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement.
The
Sudan issue has ranked high on the U.S. administration's priority list, as confirmed by U.S. President Barack Obama. Obama said his country is using a range of diplomatic means to ensure peaceful voting in the referendums next January. In a meeting with voters, Obama warned of the eruption of a new civil war in Sudan, saying that if a war breaks out, it may create more room for terrorist activities that may be directed against the U.S.
In today's Sajalat program, we will discuss the situation in Sudan and the possibility of secession that has been semi-announced. We talked to African affairs researcher Dr. Mudawi Al-Turabi. Would you talk about the movement in favor of unity, if it exists? Because I am aware that in the north of Sudan, some are critical of the Nefasha agreement that granted voting rights to the Southerners, and some in the north are saying, let us vote and we'll grant the South secession. Are there groups that are defending that position?
يوجد في الشمال تيار تحت مسمى.
In the north, there is a movement called the Just Peace Forum. This movement was initiated by architect Al-Tayyib Mustafa, former president of Sudan TV, former president of the telecommunications sector, and editor-in-chief of Al-Intibaha newspaper.
رئيس مجلس تحرير جريدة الانتباه. وهو غير هذه الصفات أيضا يمت للسيد الرئيس بصلة.
In addition, he's associated with the president being his uncle. However, certainly being his uncle or otherwise does not grant Al-Tayyib Mustafa's opinion added value.
هذا رأي لتيار عريض موجود والله لا أستطيع أن أقول لك هذا التيار عريض أم غير عريض لكن تيار مسموع.
Since the agreement was signed, or right after, they have become convinced that the South forms an economic and political obstacle to the North, and for that reason they should let go of the South. This is the opinion of those in favor of secession.
سياسيا على الشمال. إذن فليذهب. هذا تيار انفصالي. لكن هذا التيار أستطيع أن أقول لك بأنه
But this movement is not powerful in the north and it is unable to attract a large number of supporters.
It is a movement, not a political party. And in turn, whose point of view does it represent?
Even if we counted all its supporters, they would not constitute more than 1 or 2% of the north.
But ideologically, do you believe that the average northerner would consider the South's secession a catastrophe or one less issue to worry about?
It depends.
I mean, during the war between the North and the South, there was support for unity.
Well, it depends. It depends. The average northerner is essentially concerned about stability and cares that the state functions without any tension. I mean, for the past 50 years, the state has endured a lot. For 49 years, its economy has suffered from additional taxes, the rationing of purchases, oil and energy consumption, all in the service of the war machine. The average citizen cares about living comfortably in their own state. However, as for the long-term strategy related to the implications of the South's secession, be it beneficial or harmful, the average citizen is unconcerned about such issues. This talk is reserved for the elite. The elite can direct public opinion to the left or to the right if it wishes.
In other news, Bahrain's Centre for Human Rights has lashed out at Manama over restrictions it has imposed ahead of the upcoming parliamentary elections. The Human Rights Centre has said in a report that the government is preventing international and regional organisations from monitoring the elections. It says authorities are instead secretly funding an organisation to monitor the October 23rd elections in line with their own wishes. The report says that authorities are putting pressure on an Arab group which is monitoring media during the elections. The centre has called for an end to the restrictions, describing them as an indicator of declining freedom in the country. Manama has arrested hundreds of people in recent months and charged more than 20 opposition leaders with plotting to topple the government. In Iraq, politicians have criticised the government's decision to release Saudi prisoners from Iraqi prisons.
Well, opponents of the new move, Nargis, are saying that such a step threatens the country's national security. Press TV's Bassam al-Bayadi reports from the capital, Baghdad.
The Iraqi government announced a few days ago that it would release 100 Saudi prisoners who entered the country illegally. According to the Interior and Defense ministers, more than 400 Saudi prisoners are held in the Iraqi prisons, most of them for charges brought against them by Iraqi plaintiffs, and the rest for carrying out terrorist activities in the country. Some experts have criticized the step as politicizing a purely judicial issue, saying such a decision will embolden the terrorists.
Any action like this, I think they will increase, and that means they will reward that terrorist, and that means they will encourage that terrorist to escape to Iraq from the Saudi border. And you know, all the world knew that the majority of the terrorists coming from Iraq to Iraq from Saudi border.
In the meantime, the Iranian ambassador to Iraq renewed his call on the Iraqi government and officials to release Iranian pilgrims held in Iraqi jails. The Iraqi officials say those Iranian prisoners who were arrested for entering the country without a valid visa or those who were detained by mistake should be released as soon as possible.
Those who entered the country without legitimate visas, entries, or just entered for visiting the holy sites in Iraq, those are not terrorists or drug smugglers. Those are ordinary citizens that by mistake, whatever the mistake is, entered the country. Now those people should be returned to Iran.
Since the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, its government has repeatedly called on the Saudis and some other Arab neighbors to control their borders with Iraq, through which they say many terrorists have entered the country. After the announcement of the Iraqi government that it will release the Saudi prisoners from the Iraqi prisons and have them returned to their country, the Iranian ambassador in Iraq called on the Iraqi officials to take the same step toward the Iranian prisoners and have them released. Wissam al-Bati, Press TV, from inside the Iranian embassy in Baghdad.
The Iraqi army has received the third shipment of US-made Abrams tanks, raising the total number of tanks in its arsenal to 35. The shipment is part of a military agreement signed between Iraq and the US.
Meanwhile, Washington is still considering a request submitted by Iraq in which the US is to supply the Iraqi Air Force with F-16 fighter jets.
The Iraqi army has received the third shipment of US-made Abrams tanks, raising the total number of tanks in its arsenal to 35. This is part of a military agreement between the Iraqi government and the U.S., mandating the latter supply Iraqi security forces a total of 120 tanks.
الدبابة التي أمامكم أخوتي الأعزاء هي دبابة الجيل الثالث التي تتمتع بكافة
My dear brothers, this tank you see here is an M1 Abrams, which is a third-generation battle tank.
هذه الدبابة أمامكم الآن هي لحد الآن الدبابة رقم 1.
This tank enjoys military superiority in terms of shelling, protection and mobility. It's one of the heaviest main battle tanks currently in service and is used in armoured ground warfare and combat.
أو الاشتباك القريب بالآليات المدرعة المختلفة. كان تخطيط وزارة الدفاع لبناء جيش العراق.
The Ministry of Defense is seeking to build and upgrade the Iraqi army. The aim is to protect national security, provide maximum protection for the nation, counter internal and external challenges and threats, as well as achieve and sustain self-sufficiency.
نائب القائد العام للقوات الأمريكية المتمركزة في العراق مايكل بابيرو
Deputy Commander of U.S. Forces in Iraq, Michael Barbaro, said that his country is committed to implementing the articles of the military agreement signed between Washington and Baghdad. According to the Security Pact, the U.S. is to train the Iraqi army and arm and equip it with the most advanced weapons. Barbaro praised the Iraqi forces and expressed confidence in its ability and military superiority, both at the combat and logistic levels.
I would just add أريد أن أؤكد لكم منذ أول شهر أيلول
I just want to add that since early September, the mission of the 50,000 members of the U.S. forces in Iraq has been focused on training, arming, and supporting the Iraqi armed forces. We are working closely with the Minister of Defense and other security departments.
مع معالي الوزير ومع الوزارات الأمنية بهذا الخصوص.
وتدرس الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية حاليا طلبا تقدمت به الحكومة العراقية.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is considering a request submitted by the Iraqi government in which Washington is to supply the Iraqi Air Force with F-16 fighter jets, in addition to supplying the Iraqi army with advanced arms and military equipment. After the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from Iraq, the Iraqi army is seeking to arm itself with advanced weapons and military equipment, and the Abrams tank is part of this arsenal. This highly mobile tank will be used to provide ground, air, and naval support for the Iraqi army.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.